First of all, what's happened here? Through sort of the interaction of government policy and responses to it, we figured out how to give houses away. No down payment, no questions asked. That's giving them away. And when you give something away, demand rises. If demand is rising and supply is slow to respond, prices rise. And that seems to be a self-validating proposition for a while. Then you take these mortgages and you put them in packages, securitization it was called, and you peddle them around. And then you leverage them, maybe 30 to 1, these pieces of paper. And so you have built yourself a house of cards that's waiting for a strong wind to come along and blow it over. And when it blows it over, you have big problems in the housing market, and you have created turmoil in the world of finance. That's what happened. Very simple terms. So what has taken place in response to this? So over the past year, what we have seen is massive, massive intervention. When people talk about getting up a big package, come on. We have had massive intervention in financial markets, largely by the Fed and the Treasury. We had a discussion down at Stanford this morning, and Michael Boskin had a paper there, and he had recorded the exposures right now, the exposures, when you add them up, of the Fed and the Treasury and the FDIC and the Housing Administration, which is relatively small. These exposures come today to $8.5 trillion. That's a staggering sum of money, I think, particularly when you realize that our GDP is about 13 trillion. So it's breathtaking. And then we had a representative of the Fed at this meeting this morning, and he described some facility. He said, well, it's not very much. It's only 250 billion, so it doesn't do anything. So people have totally lost their sense of proportion about what is a meaningful amount of money. But this is where we are. By this time, the government has acquired a lot of so-called toxic assets. They hope that if they can hold them for a while, maybe some of them will be worth something. I suspect that a lot of them aren't worth anything. But this is on a large scale. And by this time, the government also owns, in varying degrees, many well-known financial institutions. That's what's happened. Now, all of this has been done with hardly any involvement by the Congress. The only real involvement was in the appropriation of this $700 billion bailout bill. And it is interesting that shows how uneasy the general American public is about all of this. Because the views of the $700 billion bailout by the general public were extremely negative. So at least it seems to me, all this has happened on a kind of an ad hoc basis. Something comes up, you do something. There's very little sense of a strategy. Here's the problem, here's what it takes to do something about it, here are the things we're going to do, and this strategy will get us somewhere. You don't get the feeling. You get the feeling something happens and you go and you do something about it. It's sort of like there's a fire, go put it out. That's what's been happening. Now, if you're an experienced person with fires and you know something about the forests and what happens, you know that there are a lot of instances where it's better not to try to put the fire out. You let it burn itself out. And then you do something else. When the weather gets wet, you put fires in there in order to eliminate the fuel. In other words, you try to prevent the fire from consuming you. So that gives me the title of what I want to say, which is, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Put it another way, it seems to me, as people do this, that, or the other about what's going on, everything should have in it the notion of we're trying to prevent, we're trying to get to a better future, not just put this fire out, whatever it may be. So what should we be doing? Well, I have been fascinated to watch the president-elect and his moves, what he's done, appointments. I know quite a few of the people who have been installed in various posts, and I must say they are of very high quality. The competence level is impressive. And one of the things he said is that he has charged his economic team with developing what he called a 2-year plan. I said, that has a good ring. Sounds like he's going to try to get a strategy. I'm extrapolating, I'm hoping. But if that's where he's going, I say fine. And here's a statement that he made yesterday. I'll read it. I know rebuilding our economy won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. I also know this. Right now, somewhere in America, a small business is at work on the next big idea. A scientist is on the cusp of the next breakthrough discovery. An entrepreneur is sketching plans for the startup that will revolutionize an industry. Right now, across America, the finest products in the world are rolling off our assembly lines. And the proudest, most determined, most productive workers in the world are on the job, some already on their second shift of the day, many putting in longer hours than ever before. Those are the ones who are employed. After nearly 2 years traveling across the country, meeting with workers, visiting businesses large and small, I am more confident than ever before that we have everything we need to renew our economy. We have the ingenuity and technology, the skill and commitment. We just need to put it to work. It's time to not just address our immediate economic threats, but to start laying out the groundwork for long-term economic prosperity, to help American businesses grow and thrive at home, and expand our efforts to promote American enterprise around the world. I say, amen. Wants to have a plan? These fundamental ideas are a pretty good start. Now, what would I suggest that he have in mind as he puts this together? First of all, let's look at a few principles that have to be part of this strategy. Number one, you must realize that something that is permanent, that you said is there and it's going to stay there, will have a much greater impact than something transitory that's just here today, gone tomorrow. This gets demonstrated and demonstrated and demonstrated. Our revered late Milton Friedman demonstrated this massively and made this interesting distinction between permanent income and transitory income. John Taylor had a fascinating little piece in the Wall Street Journal, I think it was last week, building on some testimony, and it had a graph. You remember the $150 billion bailout package? Well, the graph is of after tax and after government programs and so on, income. So the income goes like this, and then there's a big blip. Now, underneath it is another graph of consumer spending, and sort of flat. In other words, the blip did nothing. It was an example of transitory income having no impact. It was a waste of $150 billion. There goes $150 billion of deficit of national debt for no reasonable purpose.